Imagine a man who can glide across a room with the grace of a dancer, strike with the precision of a master swordsman, and carry an entire film with nothing more than a quiet stare. That man is Jet Li. To millions of fans across the globe, he isn't just an actor. He's a living legend, a bridge between ancient martial traditions and the modern movie screen. His story is not only about fight choreography and kung fu battles, but about resilience, cultural impact, and the sacrifices that shaped his life. What makes Jet Li truly fascinating isn't just what you see on screen, but the decades of discipline, struggle, and transformation hidden behind the spotlight. Let us dive into 10 astonishing facts about Jet Li that reveal why he remains one of the most captivating figures in the world of martial arts and cinema. 10. Jet Li was discovered as a child martial arts prodigy. Jet Li's journey didn't begin with Hollywood, fame, or even a movie set. It began in a modest Beijing neighborhood where he was born in 1963 as Li Lianjie. At just 8 years old, his life took a turn most children couldn't even imagine. While most kids were busy with games and school, Jet Li was handpicked by his teachers to join a special summer sports program. It was here that his incredible natural ability for wushu, a traditional Chinese martial art blending performance and combat, was first noticed. Wushu wasn't simply about throwing punches or swinging weapons. It demanded flexibility, rhythm, stamina, and intense focus. To excel at it meant dedicating countless hours to repetitive drills, mastering forms, and honing both body and mind. Jet Li thrived in this environment. He wasn't just good, he was extraordinary. His coaches quickly realized they had a rare gem in their hands, a child whose speed, precision, and instinct outshone even teenagers who had trained for years. By the age of 11, he was already winning national championships in China. To put that into perspective for an American audience, imagine a middle schooler stepping into the NFL and outperforming grown men. That was the kind of gap Jet Li had created. He didn't just compete, he dominated. He became a 5-time national wushu champion before he was even a teenager. His reputation grew so large that he was often invited to perform before huge crowds, including high-ranking officials. There's a famous story about how young Jet Li performed wushu for Richard Nixon, the President of the United States, during a cultural exchange in 1974. Nixon was so impressed by the small boy A.'s mastery of martial arts that he reportedly asked him to be his personal bodyguard. Jet Li, still just 11 years old, politely declined, saying that he wanted to serve his own country instead. That moment alone revealed something essential about him. Beyond his physical abilities, he carried a strong sense of loyalty and pride in his roots. Think about how rare that is. Most kids would have been dazzled by the attention of a U.S. president. But Jet Li stayed grounded, focused on his art. That sense of purpose carried him forward, shaping his life not just as a performer, but as a man who would always see martial arts as more than a career. It was his identity, his philosophy, his foundation. This early discovery as a prodigy didn't just set him on a path toward fame. It cemented his destiny. Without that summer program, without the sharp eyes of his coaches, the world might never have known Jet Li. But once the world did see him, there was no going back. He was no longer just a boy. He was already a phenomenon. 9. His first movie made him a national hero. Fast forward a few years, and Jet Li's incredible skill led him from championship stages to film sets. But his debut was unlike anything Hollywood usually offers young stars. At just 17 years old, he starred in the 1982 film Shaolin Temple. This movie didn't just launch his acting career, it sparked an entire cultural movement. Shaolin Temple was more than entertainment. It was a story that tapped into deep cultural pride, telling of a humble boy who trains at the legendary Shaolin Monastery to become a warrior monk. For Chinese audiences, this wasn't just a martial arts flick. It was a powerful reawakening of national identity, especially at a time when China was opening up after years of cultural and political upheaval. Jet Li's portrayal of the young hero wasn't just convincing, it was electrifying. Audiences saw in him not just an actor, but the embodiment of discipline, honor, and spiritual strength. To grasp the scale of this, think about the American film Rocky in 1976. Just as Sylvester Stallone's underdog boxer inspired millions of Americans with hope and grit, Jet Li's Shaolin Temple did the same for China. Except, here's the kicker. While Rocky was a massive hit in America, Shaolin Temple sold an estimated 300 million tickets in China. Yes, you heard that right, 300 million. And remember, this was the early 80s, a time when China's movie industry wasn't nearly as globalized as it is today. That number is mind-blowing. For Jet Li personally, this film made him a household name overnight. People across the country began practicing wushu after watching him on screen. Martial arts schools saw a surge of interest. Parents who had once considered sports a distraction now wanted their children to emulate Jet Li's discipline. He became a role model for millions, embodying both strength and humility. What's remarkable is that Jet Li wasn't playing a flashy, arrogant hero. He was portraying a monk, a figure of simplicity, restraint, and inner power. And yet, audiences connected with him on a visceral level. They saw authenticity. They saw someone who wasn't just acting but channeling years of real training, sweat, and discipline. That authenticity became his signature. Unlike actors who had to fake martial arts with camera tricks, Jet Li didn't need illusions. Every move was real, every stance earned from childhood. The success of Shaolin Temple also gave rise to a series of sequels and similar films, all riding on Jet Li's shoulders. He wasn't just the star, he was the symbol of a cultural renaissance. To this day, many older fans in China still remember the experience of watching that film as a turning point in their youth, a moment when martial arts felt alive again, when tradition felt modern, and when a quiet young man with lightning-fast fists became their hero. In a way, his first film didn't just make him famous, it changed the trajectory of martial arts cinema forever. Without Jet Li and Shaolin Temple, the genre might not have exploded the way it did in the 80s and 90s, paving the way for international stars like Jackie Chan to find wider recognition. Jet Li had, in essence, lit the spark that reignited martial arts as a cinematic powerhouse. Year 8. Jet Li almost lost his life on set. For all the grace and precision you see in Jet Li's films, the reality behind the camera has often been far more dangerous than most people realize. Unlike many modern productions where CGI or stunt doubles are heavily relied on, Jet Li built his career during an era when martial arts movies demanded authenticity. Directors and audiences alike wanted the punches to feel real, the sword fights to look lethal, and the falls to look painful. And Jet Li, ever the perfectionist, was willing to risk his own safety to bring that authenticity to life. One of the most terrifying examples happened during the filming of the Shaolin Temple sequels. While shooting an action sequence involving high-speed horse stunts, Jet Li was nearly trampled to death. He had to leap onto a galloping horse in a choreographed move, but the horse panicked, veered off course, and threw him down violently. The other horses in the scene nearly ran him over. For a few moments, everyone on set thought the young star's career, and maybe even his life, was over. But that wasn't the only close call. Later in his career, while working on Once Upon a Time in China, he filmed scenes involving acrobatic wirework combined with weapon combat. In one sequence, a miscalculated move caused him to crash into a metal prop, nearly breaking his neck. Crew members rushed in, horrified, but Jet Li simply dusted himself off and insisted on continuing. He knew that audiences didn't want polished fakes. They wanted to see something raw, something that felt real. Think about that in the context of American cinema. Today, most blockbuster stars rely on stunt doubles for the riskiest work. Even actors like Tom Cruise, known for doing their own stunts, operate with state-of-the-art safety protocols and massive insurance policies. Jet Li, on the other hand, was working in Hong Kong and mainland Chinese cinema during the 80s and 90s. industries that didn't always have the same level of safety oversight. The risks were higher, the equipment was more rudimentary, and yet he pushed himself to the absolute edge. There's a revealing story from his time filming Fearless in 2006. The movie was meant to be his final wushu epic, and he wanted every fight to feel unforgettable. In one rooftop duel, Jet Li insisted on performing a dangerous sequence in which he had to execute a spinning kick near the edge of a steep drop. Crew members begged him to let a double handle it, but he refused. When asked why he was taking such risks at an age when he no longer had to prove himself, Jet Li gave a simple answer: "The audience deserves my best." That mindset speaks volumes. For Jet Li, martial arts cinema was never just a paycheck. It was an art form. He saw himself as a messenger, someone who had to bring the spirit of martial arts to the screen with total honesty, even if it meant risking injury. And yet, behind the camera, those risks began to take a toll. Years of injuries piled up. His knees, shoulders, and back all suffered from decades of punishing stunts. Unlike an athlete who might retire after 1 decade at the top, Jet Li pushed his body for nearly 3 decades of action filmmaking. By the time he reached his 40s, the cumulative damage had already begun to show. But here's the thing. When audiences watch his movies, they don't see pain. They see fluid motion, flawless execution, and breathtaking battles. That's the paradox of Jet Li. His art looks effortless, but it was built on a foundation of sacrifice, scars, and near-death experiences. His willingness to almost lose his life on set is part of what made him not just an actor, but a legend. Number 7. He was a reluctant Hollywood star. When most Asian martial arts actors dream of international recognition, Hollywood is usually seen as the ultimate goal. But Jet Li wasn't chasing fame in the West. In fact, when Hollywood finally came calling, he was hesitant, even resistant. The first major Hollywood film that introduced him to American audiences was Lethal Weapon 4 in 1998. By then, Jet Li was already a megastar in Asia, with hits like Fist of Legend and Once Upon a Time in China. He didn't need Hollywood to validate his career. He was already at the top of his game. But producers wanted a fresh face, a villain who could bring something new to the buddy cop franchise. Jet Li agreed, though reluctantly, and stepped into the role of the ruthless triad enforcer, Wasing Ku. American audiences had never seen anything like him. In a film dominated by Mel Gibson and Danny Glover, Jet Li stole scenes without uttering more than a few lines. His sheer speed, precision, and intensity made him terrifying. One critic famously wrote that Jet Li's screen presence was so powerful it made the usually cocky Mel Gibson look outmatched. For a debut, it was explosive. Hollywood immediately wanted more of him. Offers poured in, from action thrillers to big-budget martial arts vehicles. He was cast in Romeo Must Die, 2000, Kiss of the Dragon, 2001, and Cradle II: The Grave, 2003. These films paired him with American stars like DMX, Aaliyah, and Jason Statham. They were designed to blend hip-hop culture, urban backdrops, and martial arts spectacle, something new for mainstream U.S. cinema. And yet, Jet Li often expressed discomfort with how Hollywood treated martial arts. He noticed that many scripts leaned heavily on stereotypes: Asian villains, mystical warriors, silent kung fu masters. He worried that these roles didn't respect the depth of martial arts as a philosophy. Unlike Jackie Chan, who embraced Hollywood's comedic action style, Jet Li remained serious, disciplined, and somewhat aloof. For him, martial arts wasn't just entertainment. It was a way of life rooted in discipline and spiritual practice. That difference showed. While his Hollywood films performed reasonably well, they never captured the same cultural resonance as his Asian projects. Critics sometimes noted that Hollywood didn't quite know what to do with him. He was too intense for comedy, too quiet for conventional leading roles, and too principled to simply play into stereotypes. A striking example was when he turned down The Matrix. The Wachowskis wanted him to play Seraph in The Matrix Reloaded. It would have been a massive role, placing him alongside Keanu Reeves and Hugo Weaving. But Jet Li refused. Why? Because he discovered that the studio wanted to digitally record his martial arts movements, essentially owning his techniques forever. Jet Li felt this was a violation, reducing his life's work to a data file that corporations could recycle. So he walked away, even though the role could have made him even more famous in the West. Instead, Jet Li chose projects that resonated with his values. Hero, 2002, directed by Zhang Yimou, became an international hit, even nominated for an Academy Award for Best Foreign Language Film. In that film, Jet Li wasn't just fighting for spectacle. He was embodying themes of loyalty, sacrifice, and unity. That was the kind of storytelling he wanted. His relationship with Hollywood remained complicated. On one hand, American audiences admired his talent and presence. On the other, he never quite fit into the system that wanted to mold him into a generic action star. Jet Li wasn't interested in being America's next martial arts icon. He wanted to remain true to himself, even if that meant stepping away from Hollywood's spotlight. In retrospect, that decision may have preserved his legacy. Instead of being overexposed in formulaic action movies, Jet Li maintained an aura of mystery and authenticity. He came, he conquered briefly, and then he returned to the kinds of films that spoke to his heart. That restraint, his refusal to fully bow to Hollywood, only deepened the respect fans around the world have for him. Number 6. Jet Li battled life-threatening illness. Behind the dazzling fight scenes, Jet Li has endured battles far more personal than any villain on screen. In 2010, shocking news broke. Jet Li was suffering from hyperthyroidism, a condition where the thyroid gland produces too much hormone. For most people, this leads to fatigue, tremors, weight changes, and heart complications. For a martial artist whose body was his instrument, it was devastating. Fans were stunned when photographs surfaced showing Jet Li looking frail, his once razor-sharp physique visibly diminished. Rumors spread wildly. Some even claimed he was on the verge of death. The truth was sobering enough. His doctors told him bluntly that if he didn't slow down, he might not survive. After decades of demanding stunts, injuries, and relentless training, Jet Li's body was finally calling in the debt. The illness also magnified the damage from years of physical punishment. Old spinal injuries, joint damage, and chronic pain all compounded his struggle. At times, he could barely walk without discomfort. For someone who had once moved with the precision of lightning, it was a cruel irony. In interviews, Jet Li admitted that he had to accept his mortality in ways he had never considered before. He even joked with bittersweet honesty that he looked like a 70-year-old man despite being only in his 50s. But instead of retreating from the world, Jet Li chose resilience. He began practicing meditation and Tai Chi as therapeutic tools. These gentler arts allowed him to reconnect with martial tradition without breaking his body further. In a way, it was a return to the roots of martial philosophy, the idea that true mastery isn't about destruction, but about harmony and balance. Americans could relate to this side of his story. We often idolize athletes at their peak, forgetting that behind the highlight reels are fragile human beings. Jet Li's public illness forced fans to see him differently, not just as an invincible warrior, but as a man vulnerable to the same frailties we all face. That vulnerability made him more relatable. People admired not only his strength but also his courage in facing weakness openly. His illness also reshaped his career choices. He stepped back from high-octane action films and began focusing on projects that mattered more to him spiritually and personally. Rather than chase box office numbers, he sought meaning. That decision reflects a philosophy many Americans admire: the idea that success is just about staying on top, but about knowing when to shift gears and live authentically. To this day, Jet Li continues to manage his health carefully. While he may never again perform the bone-shattering stunts of his youth, His resilience in the face of illness has only deepened the respect he commands. For many fans, his greatest battle wasn't fought on a film set. It was fought within his own body, and it's one he continues to face with quiet dignity. 5. He devoted his life to charity and spiritual growth. One of the most surprising facts about Jet Li is that his legacy may ultimately have less to do with movies and more to do with philanthropy. After decades of global stardom, he could have easily faded into a comfortable retirement, living off wealth and reputation. Instead, Jet Li turned his focus outward, channeling his energy into humanitarian work that touched millions of lives. In 2007, he founded the One Foundation, a non-profit organization based in China that focuses on disaster relief, children's welfare, and mental health. The idea was simple but profound. If every person in China donated just 1 yuan, a fraction of a US dollar, the collective impact could transform society. That vision of small contributions creating massive change resonated with people across Asia. The One Foundation quickly grew into one of the most respected charities in the region, responding to earthquakes, floods, and other crises with speed and compassion. For Jet Li, this wasn't just a side project. He often described philanthropy as his second life's mission. He saw it as an extension of the martial arts philosophy he had practiced since childhood, the idea of service, discipline, and compassion. Just as martial arts isn't only about fighting, but about moral character, his charitable work became a way to practice those values on a global scale. His commitment wasn't without personal sacrifice. At one point, Jet Li admitted that during the financial crisis of 2008, he lost almost all of his personal fortune in bad investments tied to global markets. Instead of withdrawing from public life in embarrassment, he doubled down on his humanitarian mission. He explained that money had never been his ultimate goal. Impact was. That kind of humility struck a chord with fans worldwide. In interviews, Jet Li often emphasizes the importance of spiritual balance. He has spoken about Buddhism and meditation as guiding principles in his life. These practices helped him through his illness and personal struggles, but they also gave him clarity about what really matters. In a culture obsessed with fame and wealth, Jet Li became a rare voice reminding people that service to others can be the highest calling. For American audiences, this shift mirrors the journeys of other public figures who, after achieving everything professionally, find deeper purpose in giving back. Think of Bill Gates turning from Microsoft to global philanthropy, or celebrities like Angelina Jolie dedicating their platform to humanitarian causes. Jet Li belongs in that same conversation, not just as a movie star, but as someone using his influence for tangible good. Perhaps the most powerful illustration of his commitment came during the devastating Sichuan earthquake in 2008. Jet Li personally traveled to the disaster zone, comforting victims, helping coordinate relief, and using his platform to rally support. He didn't just write checks, he showed up. Survivors later recalled how his presence gave them hope in the darkest of times. In America, we often debate what defines a hero. Is it physical courage, professional success, or moral integrity? Jet Li's life offers an answer. Sometimes it's all three. His decision to dedicate his post-stardom years to charity and spiritual growth may ultimately define his legacy even more than his movies. Because while films can inspire, actions can transform lives in real time. 4. He balanced stardom with a deep family life. It's easy to imagine Jet Li as a man consumed entirely by martial arts and cinema, but behind the flashing lights and red carpets is a person deeply committed to his family. In fact, his journey as a father and husband reveals a softer side rarely captured on screen. Jet Li has been married twice. His first marriage, to Huang Qiuyan, was with a fellow martial artist he trained alongside in the Beijing wushu team. They shared the intensity of martial arts training, but the pressures of his rising stardom and constant travel eventually pulled them apart. Though their marriage ended, they had 2 daughters together, and Jet Li has always emphasized his sense of duty as a father. Later, he married Nina Lee Chi, a Hong Kong actress who became his partner not only in life, but in his pursuit of balance. With Nina, Jet Li had 2 more daughters, and together they built a family environment that shielded the children from the overwhelming glare of celebrity culture. For a man constantly in the spotlight, he worked hard to give his kids a sense of normalcy, privacy, and stability. What makes this fact about Jet Li so compelling is the way he describes his role as a father. He often says that despite all his fame, his proudest role is being a parent. He has admitted openly that there were times he missed out on important moments due to work, and that realization has pushed him to be more present in later years. He has also said his daughters are his greatest teachers, reminding him to slow down, laugh more, and live in the moment. For American fans, it's a refreshing contrast. In Hollywood, we often see action stars cultivating images of toughness and independence. Jet Li, by contrast, emphasizes humility and family ties. He's admitted in interviews that he tries to teach his daughters the same discipline and resilience martial arts gave him, but also the compassion and empathy he's gained from philanthropy. In his words, strength without compassion is incomplete. Stories from those close to him reveal how seriously he takes fatherhood. He reportedly declined certain Hollywood projects that would have taken him away from home for long stretches. While some might see this as career sacrifice, Jet Li saw it as protecting the foundation of his life. In that sense, his choices mirror the very philosophy he's always embodied: balance. This grounding in family also gave him the strength to endure illness and personal loss. He said that during his toughest health battles, it was his daughters and wife who gave him motivation to keep fighting. Fame fades, careers evolve, but family was his unshakable core. For fans, it's a reminder that even a global superstar who seems larger than life measures his success in the most intimate terms: love, responsibility, and connection. In a way, this fact about Jet Li shows us the human behind the legend. He's not just the master of wushu or the cinematic hero who saves the day. He's a dad who worries about his kids, a husband who leans on his partner, and a man who believes that the truest legacy he can leave is not only in films, but in the lives he nurtures at home. Number 3. He became a global cultural bridge. Few entertainers can claim to have reshaped global perception the way Jet Li has. Through his films, his philanthropy, and his public image, he has become a cultural bridge between East and West, uniting audiences through the universal language of martial arts. When Jet Li's movies first entered international markets in the late 80s and 90s, American audiences were accustomed to kung fu cinema largely through Bruce Lee and Jackie Chan. Bruce embodied intensity and philosophy, while Jackie blended comedy and stunt-driven spectacle. Jet Li introduced something different: precision, elegance, and a monk-like presence. He wasn't trying to be funny or intimidating. He embodied discipline, tradition, and a sense of timelessness. His international breakthrough, Hero, 2002, demonstrated this power vividly. The film wasn't just an action movie. It was a visual poem about sacrifice, unity, and the meaning of heroism. It stunned audiences worldwide, earning critical acclaim and even reaching the top spot at the U.S. box office when it was released in 2004. For many American moviegoers, this was their first exposure to Chinese historical epics told with such grandeur. Jet Li wasn't just an actor in that moment. He was an ambassador, carrying centuries of Chinese cultural heritage to global screens. Beyond movies, Jet Li's philanthropic efforts also served as cultural bridges. His One Foundation worked with international organizations, showing how Chinese philanthropy could integrate with global relief systems. His speeches often highlighted universal values: compassion, community, resilience. He had a unique ability to communicate ancient philosophies in terms accessible to modern global audiences. Consider also his role in The Forbidden Kingdom, 2008, where he starred alongside Jackie Chan for the first time. While the movie itself was a light fantasy, the significance of that pairing was monumental. It represented two of Asia's greatest cinematic exports coming together in a film designed for worldwide audiences. For fans in the West, it felt like a dream come true. Two legends, two styles, one story. And for Jet Li, it was another opportunity to showcase the diversity of martial arts and its power to unite cultures. Even his decisions outside of film carried symbolic weight. Remember when he turned down The Matrix Reloaded to protect the integrity of his martial arts? That decision wasn't just about personal pride. It was a stand against commodifying cultural knowledge. It showed the world that martial arts are not simply moves for the camera, but a living philosophy that deserves respect. For American audiences, his career has been a gateway into deeper appreciation for Asian cinema and culture. He paved the way for more international collaborations and helped normalize the idea of foreign-language films reaching mainstream success. Without Jet Li's contributions, it's arguable that later phenomena like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, or even Squid Game might not have found such fertile ground in Western pop culture. In this way, Jet Li has been more than an entertainer. He has been a cultural bridge builder, someone who reminds us that even across vast distances and different languages, art and discipline can connect us. His influence helped expand how the world views not only martial arts but also Chinese culture as a whole. 2. He chose philosophy over fame. One of the most remarkable facts about Jet Li is that at the height of his career, he consciously stepped away from the endless chase for fame and wealth. While most action stars fight tooth and nail to stay in the Hollywood spotlight, Jet Li looked inward and asked himself what truly mattered. His answer surprised many. He valued philosophy and personal growth far more than red carpets or paychecks. As his health struggles deepened, he began immersing himself in Buddhism. He spoke openly about how meditation and Buddhist teachings helped him find peace in a world that constantly demanded more of him. To Jet Li, martial arts and Buddhism were not separate. They were two sides of the same coin. Martial arts had taught him discipline of the body, while Buddhism taught him discipline of the mind and heart. This philosophical approach shaped his decisions. Instead of chasing the biggest movie deals, he chose projects that aligned with his values. For instance, when he starred in Fearless, he explained that it was more than just another martial arts movie. It was a statement about humility, honor, and the dangers of ego. He wanted the story to reflect the lessons he had learned in life. That true strength comes not from defeating others, but from mastering oneself. In America, where celebrity culture often glorifies excess, Jet Li's choice to prioritize philosophy resonated as refreshingly different. He wasn't trying to be the richest actor, the most bankable star, or the man with the longest filmography. He was trying to live authentically. In interviews, he admitted that stepping away from constant movie-making was risky financially, but he believed inner peace was worth more than money. That decision has also made him a role model for countless fans worldwide. People who once admired his speed and skill now admire his wisdom. By choosing philosophy over fame, Jet Li showed that life isn't just about climbing higher, it's about knowing when to stop, reflect, and choose the path that truly matters. Number 1. His legacy extends beyond martial arts. The number one fact about Jet Li is that his legacy extends far beyond martial arts and cinema. While he will forever be remembered as one of the greatest martial arts performers in history, his true impact lies in the lives he has touched and the bridges he has built. Think about it. He began as a poor boy in Beijing, discovered by chance through a sports program. He rose to become a 5-time national wushu champion, a film star who sold hundreds of millions of tickets, and an international icon who shared the screen with some of Hollywood's biggest names. But that's only the surface. Beneath it, Jet Li has been a teacher, a philanthropist, and a global citizen. His one foundation continues to help people in crisis. His public openness about illness has inspired others to face their own health battles with courage. His philosophy has influenced fans who may never step into a dojo, but who learn from his example that strength without compassion is hollow. In many ways, Jet Li embodies the idea of balance, action and stillness, strength and humility, fame and privacy. He never allowed himself to be defined by just one identity. He is not only the fighter on screen, but the humanitarian off it. Not only the monk-like hero in films, but also the father laughing with his daughters. Not only the disciplined martial artist, but also the vulnerable man managing illness with grace. For American audiences, Jet Li's story also represents something bigger, the possibility of cultural connection. Through him, millions were introduced to the elegance of wushu, the depth of Chinese storytelling, and the universality of themes like honor, sacrifice, and redemption. In that sense, his legacy is not confined to movies. It is cultural, philosophical, and human. When future generations look back, they may not only remember the dazzling kicks or the unforgettable duels, but also the way Jet Li lived, with purpose, balance, and compassion. His life reminds us that heroes aren't just created in scripts, they reforged in the choices we make every day. And that wraps up our journey through the top 10 facts about Jet Li. From his childhood as a martial arts prodigy to his rise as a global icon, from near-death stunts to life-threatening illness, from Hollywood stardom to philanthropy and spiritual growth, Jet Li's story is nothing short of extraordinary. He is living proof that true greatness isn't only about what you achieve, but about the lives you impact along the way. If you like this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with friends who love martial arts legends, and subscribe so you never miss more fascinating stories from the world of cinema and beyond. And let us know in the comments, which fact about Jet Li surprised you the most?